Well, according to a Twitter report, the Preds may be actively shopping Filip Forsberg. Kind of out of left field report. We'll talk about what that means, how much truth there is to that, and what are the chances that Forsberg actually gets traded in the next couple of weeks. But if you need some good news to cheer you up, big night for Smashville tonight. Number 35 goes into the Raptors as the Preds take on the Dallas Stars. Pekka Rinne has his jersey retired. We're going to be sharing some of our favorite Pekka Rinne memories, talk about his legacy in Nashville, and kind of debate, do we think he's going to wind up in the NHL Hall of Fame? That's an interesting discussion that's kind of been going on Twitter. All coming up today on the Locked On Predators podcast.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, thank you for making Locked On Predators your first listen of the day. We're happy to have you here. I'm Nick Morgan. I'm a writer and editor at ontheforecheck.com, and I have a partner in crime who, what's the over-under on how many times we ugly cry tonight?
Oh my gosh. It actually almost already started because I made the mistake of going back and watching the retirement video that he did. So it's ugly cry all day, all night. We're so happy. I'm Ann Kimball. I'm a writer at ontheforecheck.com, and I am going to be a hot mess.
I am excited to see that tonight. We were excited to talk about a nice little Pekka Rinne show. We had it all planned out. We were going to go through like some of our favorite moments, like his best goals and stuff like that, or best saves. I guess he only had one goal. Kind of talk about
and it was glorious.
It was glorious. Yeah. We had it. It was going to be a fun show. And then Andy Strickland, who is a rinkside reporter for Bally Sports that covers the St. Louis Blues, decided to ruin everyone's good time. If you don't know what he talked about, he put out a tweet last night saying, quote, hearing the Preds are actively shopping superstar Filip Forsberg, not listening to offers, not like, kicking the tires, actively shopping Filip Forsberg. And I guess in context of his contract being up at the end of this year, maybe not like a huge surprise, but I think in the context of the Preds are having a good season, they're in, have the high ground in the playoff spot right now. A bit of a surprise given the timing of this.
Yeah, this is a relatively unfortunate tweet, especially when I think people in Nashville are already a little bit on edge about Filip Forsberg not already being signed. I think the closer we get to the trade deadline, I think the tighter everybody in Nashville clinches, because this is something that I think fans in Nashville, they want to get this locked down. They want to have Filip Forsberg signed in here. Or if he is not going to re-sign here, they want to get a good return. And it's just sort of left everybody in Smashville feeling a little bit uncomfortable, let's say. And this tweet certainly stirred that pot.
Yeah, there's a lot to kind of unpack from that too. What does actively shopping mean? Because you can take that in a lot of different ways. Is David Poile going up to GMs and just being like, hey, on the off chance, like Forsberg's available, what's the market for him? Oh, okay. Well, thank you. We'll let you know what we decide. Sometimes it's like that. And we know how the rumor works. If, one team calls and says, hey, do you want to make a trade? Sure. Who are you interested in? Filip Forsberg, what's his status? Oh, well, we would want like X, X, and X. Oh, that's too high. Okay, bye. That conversation can get kind of put out correctly, technically, as, hey, Team X and Team Y have had conversations regarding trading Filip Forsberg. So that's something that can be wildly out of context. To me,
yes,
and I'm not an insider, but by any means. But here's what this kind of says to me. This is just David Poile doing his due diligence. And I'm not sure how big of a deal we need to make of this right now. I think he just wants to see what could potentially be out there should things maybe go south closer to March 21st.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think this is a very David Poile thing. Like, this is not outside of what David Poile does. And he's very upfront about that he likes to know the market value of his players. So this is not uncommon. David Poile has been very open about the fact he has these conversations about players. And let's remember, we went through this last season with Mattias Ekholm. I mean, Mattias Ekholm was all but packed, gonna go somewhere, and then we find out in the off season, no, Mattias Ekholm walked into David Poile's office and said, "Hey, are you trading me?" So what we're hearing in Twitter and what we're hearing could be the context is, I'm sure, a lot more broad than what a singular tweet on Twitter is sort of portraying. But this is a very David Poile thing to do. David Poile likes to know the value of his players. He has been upfront about that. And I think that this is something that would make sense for him to be out there having some conversations about it, not saying, and I don't think that's an indicator that, Filip Forsberg is out. I don't think it's necessarily an indicator that Filip Forsberg wants out. I think it's an indicator that they're maybe even working on a contract, and this is part of that information. I think you have to know all the things, and I think this is what that is, hopefully.
Yeah. There's going to be one way to find out, right? I think
right.
Regardless of what your opinion on this is, I don't think this is something that is going to be resolved until we get closer to the deadline. I mean, you've mentioned, Mattias Ekholm last year, even though there's a lot of buzz around him. Let's not forget also a couple of years ago when the Preds passed on a chance to trade Mikael Granlund. They passed on a chance to trade Craig Smith and Nick Bonino. There's even some buzz about people kicking the tires on Ryan Ellis last year. And we heard so many quotes from David Poile saying like he didn't want to do that. He still had faith in this team. He thought at the time they were kind of trending in the right direction. He thought maybe they could make a playoff push. Right now, the Predators are in a playoff spot. They are above and beyond where they were at this point of the season last year. Are they cup contenders? Maybe, maybe not. But at the same time, you're better off than where you were at this point for the last two seasons, where you passed up on, maybe getting a good return for a couple of these guys. So for Poile to go and shop Filip Forsberg right now seems very out of character, and that's why I'm kind of taking this entire report with a grain of salt. I think this is maybe nothing more than just a couple of teams having conversations like, hey, is he available? What would you want? Or Poile being like, hey, on the off chance we can't get him signed or wind up being sellers at the deadline, because, there is a month of hockey left to play between now and the deadline. What would you be willing to give up? And so this is, I'm taking this entire thing with a grain of salt. I see this more as a due diligence move than the Preds actively saying, you know what, we don't think we can get Forsberg re-signed. And we also should mention there's a couple of reports out there from other people. Robbie Stanley was one that said, hey, Forsberg still hasn't told the Preds no, he's testing free agency. David Pagnotta from the Period tweeted that Forsberg's reps were, expected to kind of meet with Poile here in the next coming months or the next coming weeks to kind of talk about future. So it doesn't seem like this is something that's,
imminent.
I guess the best way to put it would be like there probably hasn't been anything that would make Forsberg or make Poile go, yeah, absolutely, we're going to trade Forsberg at the deadline.
Right. Our good friend and coworker, Eric Dene at ontheforecheck.com, he does all of our prospect stuff, but he had really a great comment last night as we were kind of conversing about this tweet. And he said something that my husband says actually often, and the shopping doesn't mean buying. This doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be an action taken, but I agree with you. This is Poile doing general manager David Poile things. And, I think we're not going to have any. I don't know that we're going to have any news on Forsberg until closer to the deadline. I don't think there's any sort of imminent announcement getting ready to be made.
Yeah, if I bought every house I shop for on Zillow, I'd have my own set right now. It is interesting, and the only way I could maybe see, hey, let's say the Preds are kind of in the same spot they are now, and they go at the deadline. The only way I wouldn't be opposed to Forsberg trade if it was a hockey move and something that could kind of help the Preds both stay in contention this year, but maybe put them on solid ground moving forward. I look at a team like Calgary, who is clearly loading up for the playoff run this year, but also has Johnny Rose contract to figure out. Matthew Tkachuk doesn't sound like he may be very keen on staying in Calgary. There's not outside the realm of possibility for, some kind of trade involving Forsberg to Calgary for Matthew Tkachuk, and Matthew Tkachuk being a restricted free agent, Preds having a little bit more control. That's something to throw out there. I'm not necessarily advocating for that, but I'm saying, maybe there's a trade out there.
Yeah, it would be there's a narrow acceptable trade for Filip Forsberg, but I agree with you. There are some options out there. This is not, David Poile has the luxury, I think, barring Filip Forsberg flat out refusing to resign. David Poile has the luxury of really browsing, but I think any appropriate trade is there's a narrow path of what would be considered viable for Filip Forsberg. But I agree with you. I think there are a few things out there. Now, in the end, let's not trade Filip Forsberg and let's just go get Phil Kessel. Can we all just agree on that? But we'll table that for another day.
I'm sure there's going to be a trade deadline discussion coming up where that comes up. Hey, for sure. Let's cleanse the palate, shall we? Let's talk about some good hockey stuff. Pekka Rinne, the number one guy on Mount Rushmore of Predators, getting his jersey soaring up to the rafters tonight. I didn't know a good adverb for that, but yeah,
no, soaring is good.
Soaring, yeah. That's happening tonight. Pekka Rinne's jersey retirement ceremony. We're going to be looking back at our favorite Pekka Rinne memories. First, let's mention that today's show is brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. Football over and done with this season, but hey, basketball is full steam ahead. Pro college hoops. We got hockey going into the stretch run. Baseball, hopefully starting soon. Get your shit together, owners. But hey, anyway, BetOnline, they have your latest odds, totals, player performance, props, right down to where the next head coach or fired head coach is going to land, regardless of what your sport is. BetOnline is the number one spot for all of your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your source for boxing, hockey, UFC, right down to Olympic coverage. So head down to the website today. Use your mobile device to learn about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game begins. Yeah, and tomorrow is the last show of the week. We have our post-game coverage for Predators versus Stars tonight. More importantly, though, looking ahead to the Stadium Series. What events?
Cannot wait.
What events we're looking forward to. Kind of the atmosphere, fun stuff of the Preds hosting an outdoor game. That's coming up on tomorrow's show, but big night for Smashville tonight.
Huge. This is such a big week for Nashville. It's really exciting to have these events coming up so close together. It's going to be amazing and emotional and ugly cry-ish, but we're going to get through this. Yeah, we're going to talk about the best of Pekka Rinne, which of course could be an entire podcast, but we're going to narrow it down, I think.
Well, I guess it is a whole podcast because that's what we're doing right now. And if it wasn't for Filip Forsberg, probably would have been the entire podcast. Yeah, I mean,
Really.
what can you say about Pekka Rinne that hasn't already been said? We said this a million times, but it does seem like the reason he holds such a special place in Preds fans' hearts is not only just because of how good he was and, how big of a member he was in the Preds community, but it does feel like he grew up with the Nashville Predators. I can remember it was still in, high school when he made his NHL debut. And this was way back before anybody really knew, too much about prospects, who like the top draft picks were, but, a lot of people weren't really super paying close attention to Milwaukee or juniors or anything like that. And it was just Pekka Rinne, this very tall Finnish guy with a funny name that everybody was like, ha ha, he's like a giant teddy bear. And, so he made his debut and then he kind of took over the number one spot. And it was like, oh, there's this like hot young prospect. But it was back in the time when the Preds were kind of still that scrappy underdog team. And as Pekka Rinne's career evolved, as he got better, as he started being nominated for all these awards, that's when the Predators went from just, scrappy underdog, fun, fringe franchise to an actual Stanley Cup contender and an actual team that kind of, there's a cat in the background of my shot, my bad. They evolved together. So I think that's what kind of, makes Pekka Rinne so special in a lot of Preds fans' hearts is you think back to where the franchise was when he first got there and to where it is now. And he is a big part of that growth.
Absolutely. And I think too, the other thing that people can really appreciate about Pekka Rinne is that he is all Nashville Predator, in a era of hockey where there are so many players that are, moving because of free agency and better offers and this and that. Pekka Rinne has stayed here in Nashville. He's just such an icon for the city and for the team. And what he's done in the community, I think, has made him just as beloved to the people of Nashville as what he's done on the ice, which is not nothing. Let's be real. This is, this is not just a feel good. We need to retire someone's jersey. Oh, thank goodness we've got Pekka Rinne. This is somebody who, like you said, really carried this franchise for a long, long time and grew up with this franchise and saw it, started when it was still kind of struggling and saw it all the way to the Stanley Cup finals. So, there's so much to love about Pekka Rinne on and off the ice. And I think tonight is just going to be an obscene amount of appreciation for somebody that has been really great to Nashville.
And what are some of your favorite Pekka Rinne moments when you think back to his career on the ice? Is there a game, a moment that really kind of stands out to you?
I definitely have some. The last game that he played, I think, will always be a standout game. And curse all of you who made it so special for him that he could walk away, because you could have just been like meh on that, but no, you had to make it special enough.
As he came
or just don't pay attention. So he got another shutout. Don't pay attention. Anyway, that's a whole nother thing for me to work through on my own, probably. But when I think of saves, when I think of plays, when it comes to Pekka Rinne, probably my favorite save that I automatically think of is a save that he had, and I believe it was against Anaheim, which all you have to say is Anaheim and there's that vibe, but he had a save where he literally reached behind his back, hit the puck, threw his stick came up and over his head and somehow saved this puck. I mean, there are so many Pekka Rinne saves that just seem not quite possible. But when I think of those saves, I think of that. And I also think of in the Stanley Cup final game, I think it's game 4 against the Penguins. And there's a break by Sidney Crosby. Oof. And, he's on a breakaway. And there is Pekka Rinne, who, let's be honest, struggled a little bit in that series, at times, totally blocked that shot with confidence and then dove all the way across the net to break the rebound shot by Gunsel. And so that's what I picture when I think of Pekka Rinne. I think this is somebody who went all out for these saves all the time. I mean, it was 100% effort, 100% coverage, just played with all of his heart in these games.
Yeah, there's a couple that come to mind. And a lot of playoff memories, obviously. I think I can remember the first time I really remember watching him and being like, this is special, is during that 2011 playoffs. That was their first playoff series win against Anaheim. And I just remember the Ducks were a better team than the Predators.
Yeah.
That was clear, but Rinne was the guy that kept him in every game. And that's when you had like gritty goals from like David Legwand, Jared Smithson that kind of kept the Preds always in it. And I just remember it's like, Rinne was the MVP of this. And then he almost did the same thing against Vancouver, who wound up making the Stanley Cup Finals that year. I can kind of remember him the same thing, keeping them in every game, even though Vancouver was clearly the better team. That was another one. Yeah. And then I think, the Stanley Cup run that, unfortunately, as you mentioned, the Stanley Cup, I think itself was a little up and down, the finals, but that first series, the Chicago Blackhawks series, the sweep.
Oh, yes.
I don't think I've ever seen Pekka Rinne have a better performance than he did in that series. 2 shutouts, very easily could have been 3 going into that last game. But, it's like, it's hard because, he's made a lot of incredible saves. He had the goal, which I think a lot of people were losing their minds over. Just because
yes, for sure.
Afterwards, and everybody getting hyped and him just kind of smiling and waving towards the bench, just like, no, not a big thing.
I'm good.
Yeah, or they want to like come in, like pound pound the fist of the bench, and he's just like, no, it's nothing. But I think of like stretches like that. I think of stretches where he just kind of put the team on his back, as opposed to maybe 1 or 2 wild saves.
Well, and I think too, when Pekka Rinne is on and when he is in the zone, there's almost nothing that he couldn't do. And so, I mean, I don't know that you could count the number of games that Pekka Rinne won for this team because he was just in the zone. And, a lot of people don't know there was a point in time where they weren't sure if he was ever going to be able to play hockey again. He had a hip injury, had surgery, fairly common goalie hip injury, great surgery recovery. And then about 4 months later had a spontaneous infection, was on IV antibiotics for 4 months. And they didn't know if he would play hockey again. I mean, just what he has battled back from that. He very humbly, everything about the man is humble. He doesn't talk much about him stuff. So it's going to be kind of fun to watch him awkwardly receiving all the love tonight. But, this is somebody who really battles. He knows how to play hard. He knows how to fight. He knows how to, overcome things. And just his personality, I think, is just so humble and kind. And it's just, he's one of those people that gives you hope that the NHL is not overwhelmed by jerks.
Yeah. And we can certainly use more of those people, can't we? So
yes, we can.
So here's the conversation that has kind of popped up is, where do you have him in terms of being in the Hall of Fame? Because that is kind of a hotter button thing that a lot of people have been talking about. Is
Mhm.
Pekka Rinne a Hall of Famer? And that's, it's not an easy thing, because you look at his resume and there's some players, in terms of wins, that are kind of ahead of him that don't look like they'll be in the Hall of Fame. But I mean,
Yeah.
it's a hard topic to kind of debate, because we know he's the GOAT in terms of the Nashville Predators, but where is he in terms of, the NHL's all-time best? And I think that's a little bit more of a different conversation.
Yeah, and I think it's hard, there's definitely pros and cons. I mean, he definitely his career trajectory, the length of his career, how close he came to winning the Vezina and then winning the Vezina. I think, being in the Stanley Cup Finals, all these things work in his favor. But he also didn't win a cup. So this is a smaller market, which people say shouldn't affect it, but it doesn't. He also, in the era of players like Tuukka Rask, Dominic Hasek, Marc-Andre Fleury, these guys who have won Stanley Cups in the same kind of time period that Pekka Rinne's played. So I think it's as much as I want to say, of course he will make it. I think it is a complicated conversation.
Yeah, and I believe he still has a couple of years left before voting comes up. It's going to be interesting, because he's going to be the same time as Henrik Lundqvist. So that's going
Yes.
to be kind of an interesting thing. Roberto Luongo is probably going to be like kind of the next Hall of Fame goalie, I think, that gets in. It's interesting. I mean, you look at the resume, and he's 19th all time in shutouts, 19th all time in wins, has the record for most Finnish-born or wins by a Finnish-born goaltender. A lot of good stuff, but again, it's just goaltending is kind of weird when it comes to the Hall of Fame. It's like a very
Yes.
specific thing you seemingly have to try to set.
Yeah, it is it's going to be an interesting conversation, and I think it's difficult because here in Nashville, our perception of Pekka Rinne is probably different than it is nationally and internationally. So it'll be interesting to see what will come of it. But we know tonight there will be much love and fully embraced. So we've got Pekka Rinne Day coming up this evening, but we also have a game after that, and it's against the Dallas Stars. This is not a nothing game, Nick, so we're going to talk about that. What do the Predators need to do to beat these pesky, annoying Dallas Stars?
Yeah, I mean, they just have to find the things that they did against Florida and kind of build off of it. And the biggest thing that stood out was the discipline. The discipline that we had
Yes.
talked about so much earlier in the season that kind of helped the Preds get through some tough times. You saw that again. I mean, they weren't taking any dumb penalties besides maybe that one from Alex Carrier. But they were also being like disciplined with the puck too. They were being patient in the
Yes.
zone, kind of having a little bit more care with their passes, not overthinking, but not, underthinking it either, a little bit more deliberate
Right.
and confident. So that to me, I think is kind of, what the Preds did really well against Florida. And I think if they do that again, that's a kind of performance that is going to, help them against the Dallas Stars.
Yeah, and Dallas is coming in. This is their second game on a back-to-back. They went and played. They had an overtime game against Winnipeg last night, and they ended up winning in overtime. So there is probably going to be an element of just a little bit of fatigue, perhaps, with Dallas playing a back-to-back. And Dallas has been on a pretty good tear lately, but this is a team that can be wildly inconsistent as well. So this is an opportunity for Nashville, and I think it's a really important 2 points because Dallas is only behind by 4 points. They have a game in hand on Nashville, and I think it's an important game for Nashville to kind of show the play like you talked about against Florida is going to be consistent. They're going to get back to that with consistency against another team that could be tricky, the Dallas Stars. So really a great opportunity for Nashville. I think Nashville's going to have all of the energy, all of the intangibles in their favor tonight. They just need to execute as well as we know that they can.
Yeah, I mean, and we talked about Pekka Rinne earlier. Don't count out the emotional impact that can have on a team.
Mm-hmm.
You want to save your best for games like these. You want to come out with a little bit more juice, a little bit more jump. And the Preds are definitely going to be emotional when they hit that ice. They're going to play with a little bit of an edge. And I think that does help them. I think, special events and games like this, it does give the home team a little bit more energy to go out there. And, especially for a team like Dallas, who played a tough game against Winnipeg last night, that can be the difference, especially in that first period or so. If the Predators can get out there and take a big lead in that first period, maybe get a, one or two past Jake Ottinger, that's the key. Like, the Preds can definitely take control of this game with an early jump like that.
Yeah, and we know they can come from behind as they did with Florida, but I think you're right. I think an early lead would be I think it would be almost difficult for Dallas to overcome it if the Predators go up a goal or two in the first period. They got to keep playing consistently through the second period. They've had some issues with second period slumps. So if Nashville can play consistently through the second period and into the third period, I really feel like this is a very important, very winnable game for the Nashville Predators. And I think it would be great momentum heading into the Stadium Series. Also, unique game, but against a really challenging playoff team in Tampa Bay Lightning. So I really feel like tonight's game, on top of, having Pekka Rinne night and retiring his jersey, is also really important. So let's hope that Nashville can pull out a win with this one.
For sure. It is a 7:30 Central puck drop, but you're still, whether you're watching at home or the arena, you're going to want to tune in at your normal 7 o'clock time because, of course, Pekka Rinne's jersey retirement ceremony is going to be starting in a half hour before the game. And from the grapevine, from our friends at the Predators, we have heard there's going to be a lot of good surprises in store, some good stuff for fans, and a couple of familiar faces coming back to
yes.
We won't spoil too much, but it's definitely something that if you have the chance to go, definitely go. Or if you're watching from home, make sure you tune in on time because you're not going to want to miss this live as it happens. Until then, Anne, where can people find your work online?
You can find my work at ontheforecheck.com, and you can find me on Twitter at AnnK_Mama on Ice.
I'm Nick Morgan. You can find me at ontheforecheck.com as well. You can also follow me on Twitter at _NSMorgan. Also, be sure to follow the podcast on Twitter, LO_Predators. If you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Also, leave a comment. Let us know what you think about the topics we discussed, whether you think Forsberg is going to get traded or stick around for a little bit, what you want to see in Pekka's jersey retirement ceremony tonight. Just drop us a line. Let us know. That is going to do it for us today on the Locked On Predators podcast. Thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We'll be back tomorrow with a full breakdown of Pekka Rinne's big night and Preds versus Stars.